Welcome to Bad Dog Agility, a podcast helping you reach all of your dog agility goals. Whether it's competing under the bright lights of the televised finals at Westminster or successfully navigating a homemade course in your own backyard, we'll bring you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
The show starts with your hosts, Jennifer, Esteban, and Sarah.
I'm Jennifer.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 339. Today's podcast is brought to you by St. Rocco's Treats.
It's Grace from Hounds of Hack.
It's Amber from American Canine Country.
It's Cynthia from CH Dog Agility.
It's Lindsay from Y2 Canines.
And we love using St. Rocco's Treats as our high
value reward.
And you will too. Visit us at strocco'streats.shop and use the code BD30 for 30% off your first order. Enjoy the attention-grabbing flavor and easy-to-break texture that Grace, Amber, Cynthia, Lindsay, and so many others love about St. Rocco's Treats. Again, use the code BD30 for 30% off. Thank you.
And you can find a link to St. Rocco's Treats on the show notes page. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between babysitting your dog and supporting your dog. And this actually came to us from a podcast listener. I love it when they reach out and send us emails. And this listener had been watching AKC Nationals and is currently running a novice A dog. So I love it. A beginner who is watching the National Agility Championship, getting excited, seeing how agility runs at the highest levels. And she said it got her thinking because she tends to babysit her novice A dog quite a bit on course. And she's wondering if her efforts to support her dog may have been holding her back from developing her confidence. And so she noticed when she was watching NAC that she's just seeing a lot of independence from the dogs. And so that's where the idea for this podcast came from. And I love this idea because I think this is very true for novice A handlers, but I think it is also a phase that a lot of handlers go through with each new dog. So I think of it as a beginner dog phase. So let's start by, I guess, defining things like babysitting and support. So I'm going to start with how I think of these things. So for me, support in this context means that I am providing physical cues with my handling and especially with my motion that help the dog know where to go. So I am supporting them. When I run at a jump, I am supporting them taking that jump. If I am an advanced handler and I tell my dog to take a jump and I run the opposite direction, I am not supporting that jump, right? Now I'm depending on training for the dog to go find a jump that I've indicated while I go and do something else. So that's kind of how I think about support. It's basically everything that you do that makes it easier for the dog to do the right thing. So then I think, okay, what do we call babysitting then? And so for me, babysitting means I am giving my dog more support than they need. And to me, that is the absolute definition of babysitting. It is support, but it is over supporting the dog. It's giving them more support than they need. So Esteban, Jennifer, what do you think about my definitions?
All right. So if I had to think about kind of using the example that you just talked about, Sarah, I would say that my understanding or my thought process on the two is very similar. So the way that I teach, we have 6 different cues that provide the dog with information. In the case of a forward send, I think good support has 4 of those cues supporting the jump: shoulders, hand, verbal, eye, and 2 of those cues saying, hey, we're turning, right? That's the forward send. That's going to be the motion and the location. I think babysitting is, instead of saying, okay, here's the 4 that support the jump, here's the 2 that say we're turning. Babysitting is like all 6 are running up on the jump. So you're almost overrunning a forward send. You're not just saying, here are the cues, here's what we're going, this is what you need to do. But it's that, I think we think of it as insurance. Well, I'm going to take that extra step to make sure they don't pull off the jump. And that extra step isn't what they need. It's not what they're trained to do. It puts us deeper. It potentially gets a wide turn. But we think of it as, well, I need to make sure they go. Kind of almost fear of a mistake. So if I have to quantify babysitting versus support. Support is what they need. It tells them where to go. It's the 4 versus 2 balance on a forward send. And babysitting is the like, well, I'm going to do 6 to 0. I'm going to go all the way up there and almost, driving too deep or delaying crosses and doing crosses on the flat because I want to make sure that my dog goes to the jump or gets the commitment to the obstacle or doesn't pull the bar. So I think it's a very fine line because I think support is necessary. I need to tell my dog where to go and confirm in their mind, yes, I do want you to take that obstacle, but I can't watch it. I think we also could kind of get into like mental versus physical commitment and talking about the difference between the two on this.
Absolutely. And I will link to the podcast that we've done on physical versus mental commitment, because I think it's absolutely part of this. And I think if we talk about kind of phases of training, especially a new dog, then I think we can also see how support becomes babysitting. Because I think that our young and our inexperienced dogs, when they're first starting out, they kind of need maximum support. Like you might, with a brand new dog that hasn't done a lot of agility, you might have to run all the way up to a jump or even past the jump to get them to take it, right? They might need that level of support. I think that support becomes babysitting when you never progress away from that, when you always kind of give them that maximum level of support and you never test them. And so I think, how do we get away from babysitting? Well, we have to, like, if we are in a phase of training where our dogs kind of need that little extra bit of support from us, like if we pull away from their line, they pull with us, they don't take the jump in front of them, that kind of thing, then we have to occasionally remove just a little bit of that support and see what happens. And when they get that right, we have to like wildly praise them that they did their job with a little bit of less help from us so that they know to keep doing that, right? And if they make a mistake, then we know that we have removed too much of the help that they needed at that time.
Oh, so how's this for a working definition? I've been mulling around both of your comments in my head. So support is what the dog needs in order to get something done. And then babysitting, or perhaps dog sitting, no, babysitting, would be when you're giving them unnecessary help that they don't need in order to do whatever it is. And I would say additionally, it's probably costing you something as the handler, right? So if you have to really stick with the dog on the weave poles, right next to them, you can't get ahead, you can't get behind, you can't get lateral. You have to always be there to handle the entry, the exit, and every pole in between. Then you might lose some handling advantage where it would be great if you could be further ahead of the dog by the time they exit and the dog were more independent in their performance. And there's certainly going to be courses that punish handlers who have to stay with their dogs like that. So you're giving something away potentially, because otherwise I would say that it's fine to babysit your dog, because it's just support if it never costs you anything. Like you could get around the entire course and that's just the style in which you run, and there's never any advantage to be gained by doing it differently. Like what do you really need to have an independent, 20-foot send if you can literally outrun your dog everywhere?
Right.
I would argue probably not. Yes, you're babysitting by someone else's standard, but I think the standard for you and your team, you're not really losing anything there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that you're right that like we can give our dog some more support, but I do think that there is this idea, and it may be a little bit dog dependent in terms of their personality, but I have personally witnessed many dogs that after the initial phase of training where you start to remove some of the support, right? Once they work through that, they actually do have more confidence in their ability to do it. So the dog that you never ask them to do anything on their own, like you said, if you can outrun your dog, if you go everywhere and run all the way up to every single jump and you never ask your dog to do anything independently, then they never build the confidence that they can do it themselves. They're always kind of following. And I think that you can actually build confidence in dogs by asking a little bit more of them. So after that initial dip, you actually get an increase in performance. So for example, like, running contacts training, right? And at first the dog may keep pace with the handler, things like that. But as they learn the job and the more independent they can do it, the more they can kind of forget about you and run as fast as the dog can run.
I think as a parent, like there's so many correlations here to raising a kid of just like, okay, what's the support they need for the behavior, right? You're going to leave them home alone and they have to make their own dinner. So you tell them what they're going to do and where everything is, but you're not going to call them every 15 minutes. How's it going? Did you do it okay? Did you turn on the oven? That's that babysitting. And the more they do it on their own, the more confidence they have. Eventually they get to a point of being competent and normal functioning human beings. And that's that helicopter parent, right? Like if you're constantly hovering, helping, not letting them gain any independence from you or any tasks on your own, they don't develop the confidence and the ability to do it without you. So as you're saying it, I didn't think of it that way, but I'm like, oh, this sounds like a parenting podcast.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, Sarah. I know how to feed the dogs. I know I gave them the right food. I mixed it up one time.
All right, so let's talk about how to know if you're supporting or if you're babysitting. And I think here,
your instructor will tell you.
Yeah, I think that there is some of that. Absolutely. I've definitely looked at videos. But I think also a lot of times the results tell you. And the most obvious is when you don't give the dog the support they need, right? That's when the dog is going to pull off of an obstacle, pull off of a line, come with you when they should have done something else. To me, that is always a sign that that dog in that situation needed a little bit more support. So the lack of support is kind of pretty easy to diagnose, right? But then how do you know if you have crossed over from support to babysitting? And so I think one thing with babysitting is, as you pointed out, Esteban, if you are struggling to get to places on course, if your cues are late, you are probably babysitting something, and that's leading to your late cues or being out of position elsewhere on course. Either you are babysitting or you have a deficit in training. Like if you remove that extra support to get to where you need to go and your dog comes with you, then now you have a training issue. They need more support, but they need more support than you can give and still get to where you need to go. So then you have a training issue.
And I think that's really important to bring up because currently, right now, I have a scenario in my building where there's a technical element at obstacle 3 that's affecting handlers to get downstream for number 5. So handlers are not making it for 5, getting the wrong side of a backside on 5. And I think a lot of people are feeling that the issue is on 5. And I've been teaching and talking about how the issue is at 3. But what's been interesting of all the teams that I've worked with, some of them, it is too much support. They're babysitting. They can cue it and leave, and they need to trust the skill. It's cue and go, get downstream, quit babysitting, quit over supporting, tell the dog their job, let them do it and go. But in other teams, it's a deficit in the skill. So there are a couple teams that I've worked with that I've just said, from a handling standpoint, what you're doing is perfect. It looks great. You're cueing it appropriately. You're in the right spot. But as you leave, you are leaving on the desired time, but your dog is not staying committed to number 3. So because now you have to babysit 3, you're not making 5. So it really is a separation of dog training versus handling. And that's a super important point to make, because I don't want people to think that, oh, well, I'm babysitting and just need to cue and go. There may be a deficit in the dog training that needs to be addressed. So super great point there.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you came up with that example from your own classes, because I didn't want people to get lulled by our example into thinking, oh, this is for dogs that might run a little slower or have a little less confidence. I think some of the biggest babysitting issues I see are around, for example, back size and threadles, even among highly trained, very competitive teams at big national events, even international events. And the other one I see, I think it's the absolute killer in dog agility, is start lines. You know who you are. You have an otherwise pretty fantastic team. I think it's happened to the very best of us at some of the very biggest competitions where you have had to take less of a lead out than you wanted, or maybe you were overly focused on the lead out and start line and if your dog would stay, and then it immediately caused a problem somewhere else.
Right.
5 or 6, 7 obstacles downstream, but we can very easily take it back to where the real root of the problem was. And it was babysitting a particular skill, in this case, not having that confidence in the start line.
Absolutely. And I think to me, the biggest sign that you're babysitting is that you never, ever, ever pull your dog off the correct obstacle. So, I like to say that if you are never too early, then you're probably always too late. And what I mean by that is if you never pull your dog off of the correct obstacle, then you are not pushing yourself to the edge of what your dog can do. Because none of us are going to be so perfect that we give our dog the exact amount of support they need every single time and no more and no less, right? Which means if we're not perfect, then if we never give them a little bit less, meaning we pull them off, then that means that we're either perfect or too much every single time. And you don't even know where your limit is because you've never given your dog just that hair too little support and pulled them off the line. So in my opinion, a very healthy way of training and running classes or running in practice would involve at least the occasional pulling the dog off the line, because that shows that you are pushing it, that you are trying to see how little support you can get away with in your agility handling. What do you think about that, Jen?
All I keep thinking about is my recent pulling the dog off the line at the invitational finals.
Oh, yes.
the not perfect moment where I failed to assess the commitment and pulled off the line. So as you're talking, I'm like, she's talking about me. This is me. This is the moment. So yes, I agree. If that's a lot of it is trial and error, especially for young teens. Going back to who wrote this in, novice A person. I mean, a lot of it is trial and error of. Today, I had a class and we were working some forward sends and somebody kept going in too close. And I said, just decel further back, send to the dog and go, you're going way up there. She goes, I don't trust her. I'm like, well, you're never going to know what you can and can't do if you don't send. And sure enough, she sent and the dog was fine, but they were a young teen. This dog is not even 18 months old. So it was really about figuring it out. But, absolutely, mistakes can be a good thing. As they say, you either win or you learn. So you got to learn. And that timing does evolve as the team goes as well. So what you have at 18 months might be different than what you have at 6 years old as well.
Right. And that is the kind of thing that I want people to stay away from, is where you handle your dog the same way at their debut that you handle them 5 years later, right? You are running up to every single jump. You are maximally supporting every line. You don't trust your dog anywhere 5 years later. Like, that is totally appropriate at your novice debut, but you have to evolve your handling over the dog's career and account for their experience level. And you do that with the trial error in practice. So to wrap up, I'll just give a couple of ideas on how you do increase your dog's ability to do their behavior with a little bit less support, because that can be a little bit hard when you're first starting out. You're giving your dog kind of maximum support, and you feel like if you change anything, they're not gonna take the jump. They're not gonna do the weaves. They're not gonna do the contact. And I think here, I think placement of reward is just an amazing training tool to help you bridge the gap, because with just a little bit of a visual prompt of like a reward that encourages the dog to actually take the obstacle with a little bit less support, then you can let them get used to you slightly changing your handling, with that placement of reward that's going to encourage them to take the obstacle. Then they get their reward. And then, several times after that, maybe that visual cue of the reward is no longer there, but now they've kind of learned that I can do this jump, even if mom is now a foot away from the wing instead of right there at the wing. So I think really utilizing your placement of reward, whether it is a pre-placed toy, whether it is a manners minder or some sort of treat dispenser. We have a live that we did on that a couple of years ago that I'll put in the show notes. I've even just used a bowl, and I started with a bowl with a treat in it. And then maybe the next repetition, it's just the bowl. There's no treat there. And when the dog does the correct behavior, I go put a treat in, and then maybe I remove the bowl altogether. And it just really helps the dog kind of focus on the task, bridge that gap, get the rewards in. And then now the rewards are what's going to progress the behavior, right? That now you're into just straight dog training at that point. They do the right thing and they get a reward. They make a mistake and they don't. And you progress that over time. All right. Well, that is it for this week's podcast on support versus babysitting. You can let us know if you have any questions about this by commenting on Facebook or sending us an email at team@baddogagility.com. And thank you very much for the listener who sent this in. We'd like to thank our sponsors, St. Rocco's Treats and hititboard.com. Check out the Teeter Teach It only at hititboard.com. The Teeter Teach It is an easy-to-use tool that controls the amount of tip on your teeter so you can introduce motion to your dog in a gradual way. Go to hititboard.com for the new Teeter Teach It and other training tools and toys. Use discount code BDA10 to get 10% off your order. That's hititboard.com. Happy training.
Thank you for listening to Bad Dog Agility. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information, updates, and links to all our socials, just check out our website, www.baddogagility.com. If you haven't already signed up for our email subscription, we would love to have you join the BDA community. Until next time, take care.
How does Darth Vader like his bagels toasted?
On the dark side.